Now, I have told this story many times, a couple reasons, because it had a major impact on my life, and it's true. You see, on a Friday night in October 2013, I walked into my parents' house to pick up my kids. The moment I opened the door, I could tell that something was terribly wrong. There was chaos all throughout the house, and my oldest daughter was crying hysterically. I think she was 10 years old, and she kept repeating as she's crying, "I didn't know, Daddy. I didn't know." I didn't understand what she meant until I turned and saw my brother-in-law performing CPR on my dad, who was lying there lifeless. You see, my dad had a cardiac arrest that night. The paramedics arrived, and it felt like multiple cities responded to this 911 call. They worked on him for what seemed like an eternity. In my mind, it was about 45 minutes. My mom thinks it may have been even longer. What I remember most vividly is the number of times they used the paddles on his chest. 13. In my head, I was already preparing for a funeral. I was thinking about whether my mom would live with us or would she move to Las Vegas with my brother. You see, we were still in Seattle. Meanwhile, my mom had my brother on speakerphone. He was praying very loud, repeating, "Life, life, life." Look, we're all Christians in our family. I understand the faith behind it. But internally, I was processing something very different. You see, the circle of life is death. And because we're Christians, in death, we find life. So why they kept praying for life was beyond me. Eventually, the head EMT pulled my mom and me aside and told us they were going to stop trying to resuscitate my dad. At the exact moment when they said, "We're going to stop," someone from the other room shouted, "We got something." This is a true story. So they rush him to the hospital, and on the way, they lose him again, and they resuscitate him again. By the time we get to the hospital, he is in a medically induced coma. We meet with the doctor, and I understand that these doctors, they cannot provide hope for obvious reasons. And again, I'm still thinking about, what do I do with my family? How do I take care of my family? I'm the oldest son, and it falls on me now, right? But my dad is in a medically induced coma, and he's alive, and I'm going back and forth in my head. Meanwhile, my mother is declaring a miracle and that he's alive and that she is praying for life. This doctor told us, he didn't come out and say that the paramedics shouldn't have done what they did, but he said these words: "Best case scenario, your dad, your husband would be a vegetable." And at that very moment, I thought to myself, oh, heck no. Oh, heck no. Did we pray my dad back to become a vegetable? I'll tell you more in a minute.
What video is this, Troy?
It's Move the Room.
Oh, okay.
Why?
I'm like, what's the purpose of this video?
Oh, you wait.
Okay.
You wait, dude.
I'm
This is
so
gonna be a
lost.
good one. What's going on, guys? Brandon literally just asked me, what's the point of this video? There's a point in this episode of the Move the Room podcast. Obviously, the story is deeply personal to me. And I remember the details exactly with clarity because I lived them. I can still see the room where my dad was. I can still hear the voices of the nurses and the doctors trying to tell us we have to prepare ourselves, that no one makes it out alive after going through what my dad went through. I can still remember what was going through the music that was played. My dad was in a coma for 11 days. And while I'm there for these 11 days, I mean, there came a point where I was starting to make cold calls from the hospital. And back then in 2013, the caller ID would show hospital. You know how many people pick up a cold call from a hospital? I mean, it's crazy. I got a hold of everyone I wanted to get a hold of because they thought somebody was in the hospital and they had to get a hold of them, and it was me making a sales call. It was fantastic. Anyway, I digress. So I'm there for 11 days, and we're praying, and we're believing, and we're doing this prayer campaign. Today, he is fully recovered. He spends time with his 8 grandchildren and 1 great-granddaughter. He pastors alongside my brother here in Las Vegas. Now, when something that significant happens in your life, it shapes you. It gives you a story that carries emotional weight. And in this episode, I want to teach you how to use deeply personal stories to move a room responsibly and effectively. Personal stories can build trust We talked about it in the last episode. It can create perspective and shift the audience that you're talking to, but only if you handle it with discipline. So let's walk through how to do that well. First off, remember the right details. When you have a traumatic story with a positive ending, your responsibility is to remember the right details. You see, the power of a personal story is not simply in the headline, although my dad's headline was pretty cool. Dead for 45. I mean, it was really cool. It was my first movie I made called Dead for 45. The power of a personal story is not in the headline. It is in the emotional progression. What were you thinking in the moment? What assumptions were you making? What fears were you processing? What shifted inside you as circumstances changed? Those internal transitions are what allow the audience to step into the experience with you. It's a journey, the hero's journey. For me, the buyer's journey. It's a journey that your audience goes with you. People feel what you communicate emotionally. If you only state events, they receive information. If you articulate what you felt at specific turning points, they experience the story with you. Details serve as anchors. The exact words the doctor used, the internal contrast between resignation and prayer, the tension between what you believed and what you were preparing for. These are the details that will move a story forward. At the same time, not every detail belongs in your story. Only include what advances the emotional arc or clarifies the stakes. When you prepare to share a personal story, identify the moments that matter most. Those are the moments your audience will remember. And I'm going to say something controversial. Practice your story. There is a misconception that personal stories should always be spontaneous. I do not agree with that approach. A story can be authentic and still be practiced. When a story carries emotional weight, preparation becomes even more important. In your personal space, practice the sequence of events. The timeline is so important. Practice how you transition from fear to hope. Practice how you describe your internal dialogue. Practice where you slow down, where you move forward in telling the story. All of it matters. Rehearsing a story does not make it artificial, man. It does not. It makes it clear. It ensures that the emotional arc lands the way it should. Without practice, you risk rambling or losing structure. You also risk allowing your emotions to control the delivery instead of guiding the room with intention. Trust me, your audience will appreciate you practicing a personal story. A powerful story deserves thoughtful preparation. It's not about memorizing lines. It's about clarity and really refining that clarity.
Troy, how many times did you practice your dad's story?
A lot, man. I mean, I made a movie about it. It was the first time I made a movie. And so I had all the kids. It's on YouTube. It's called Dead for 45.
Link in the bio.
No, it's not in the bio. It may be under the family YouTube channel, but all the kids played their part as B-roll, and I told the story. All the music we used was from the band I was in. I didn't want to pay royalty. So the band that I was in, we played that, and it's powerful, man. Like, I mean, the quality is home movie.
Right.
I'm not going to try and lie to anybody. It felt like, I filmed with my phone.
Oh, good.
So everything on my phone, and I edit it in iMovie.
What's up, my movers? Hey, remember, I'm just getting back to podcasting. It's been a few years, and over those few years, I've noticed everyone says this thing right in the middle of their podcast to like, comment, and smash that subscribe button. So if you like this video, do me a solid and hit the notification bell so you will never miss a future update. Now let's get back to it.
So during that season of my dad being in the hospital, I was working in the hospital. As I mentioned before, I was doing sales for a business intelligence consulting firm, which we helped companies look at data to make better decisions and to tell stories based on the data. Hours in the hospital room. I would pray, then I would work. I would pray, then I would work, making the cold calls. While sitting in the room with my dad, I could not ignore the equipment surrounding him. Machines beeping, tubes were all inside of him. Screens were flashing the entire time. It was crazy. The equipment was literally keeping him alive while he was in this coma. This is a true story. And every time I looked at the machines, I saw the logo of the company that we were currently doing business with. Company that had a regional office in the greater Seattle area. We were doing work for them. And a phase 2 opportunity came up with this particular client. So my boss and I are getting ready to meet with them. This is probably 2 or 3 months after my dad had come out of the hospital. And we get ready to present to the VP and the head of business intelligence for this medical company. And we showed everything we did in phase 1. And we had a successful phase 1. We had all the slideshow and stuff. And as I ended, I turned off the presenting slides and I looked at the two across the table, and the owner of the company was sitting on my side. And I told them what I experienced with my dad in the hospital. I told them about sitting in that hospital room and seeing their equipment keeping him alive. And I told them that for me, working with them wasn't about closing a deal or revenue. It was about helping them use better data so they can understand their data better, so they can make better decisions and ultimately save more lives like my dad. As I told that story, the VP of the company leaned into the table and started wiping his eyes. You see, he started crying. We closed the deal. As my founder and I walked out, the owner of the company looked at me and said, "Wow, ballsy move." It wasn't a move, though. I wasn't trying to make a move. You see, it's the truth. And that moment is important. I wasn't using it to manipulate. I wasn't trying to get them to do something that maybe they didn't want to do. I believed in what they did. I had lived the impact of what they did. I was not using the story as a tactic. And that's what you need to take away from this. The reason that story worked in that meeting is not because it was emotional. It worked because it was aligned. I did not start the meeting with trying to shock the room. I waited until we were discussing the future of a partnership. I waited until we were talking about impact and outcomes. The story simply supported the direction of the conversation. If I had told the story in a different setting, it may have felt excessive. If I had forced it into the wrong moment, it might have felt manipulative. But in that meeting with that company discussing life-saving equipment with their brand on it, it was relevant, man. It was relevant. This is where many communicators go wrong. They discover that a personal story moves people, so they begin inserting it everywhere. But placement determines whether a story builds trust or creates discomfort. Ask yourself whether the story reinforces the objective of the moment. In that meeting, the objective was not simply to close revenue. It was to reinforce the value of their mission. My story demonstrated that I understood their mission on a personal level. That's why it didn't feel like a ballsy move. Strategic storytelling is about alignment between the story, the audience, and the objective.
I watch a lot of podcasts, and that podcast host is in a groove, and he's spitting fire or she's spitting fire, and they're moving right along, and all of a sudden, whoop, we have a side transition where they do a promo. Well, I'm going to do the same thing. If you're a business owner and you feel like your message should be landing better than it is, there's a good chance the issue is not your offer. It's the way you're telling your story, especially on video. And through Boom Video, my team and I help businesses turn their message into clear, story-driven videos that actually connects with their target audience. We work in Vegas, headquartered in Henderson, actually, East Henderson, but it's the Vegas Valley. And we go to Phoenix, we go to Seattle, we go to SoCal. If that's you, if you have a business in any of those areas, and this topic resonates with you, then please reach out. I would love to get to know you better. I would love to get to know your story better, and let's see if we can work together.
Another reason that story worked is because I told it with control. I was not a blubbering mess in that meeting. Was not trying to extract sympathy. I was steady. I was clear and grounded in what had happened and what it meant to me. And that distinction matters. When you tell a deeply personal story in a professional setting, your composure becomes part of the message, right? The room is not only evaluating what you are saying, they're evaluating how you are carrying it. If you lose control emotionally, even unintentionally, the audience shifts from listening to the lesson to managing the moment. They begin wondering if you are okay. They begin feeling responsible for your emotional state. Once that happens, the focus leaves the principle you are teaching. Emotional control does not mean emotional suppression. It means emotional stewardship, that you have processed the experience enough that you can talk about it without being overtaken by it. That communicates strength. It communicates maturity. The audience is not your therapist. Don't dump on them with a personal story. In the meeting I shared, The emotion was real. The conviction was real. The story was true, but the delivery was intentional. I had told that story before, reflected on it, rehearsed it. I knew where to slow down, where to move forward. I knew which details mattered and which did not. That preparation created space between the event and the delivery. And that space is important, man. It allows you to lead the room rather than be led by your emotions. And I know some of you are thinking, that sounds very manipulative. It's not, though. It's persuasive. And one of these episodes that we do for Move the Room is going to be the difference between manipulation and persuasion, because both are using the same techniques. Okay? So it's not manipulation if your heart is to lead an audience and move them to a solution rather than a problem. When someone hears a personal story delivered with steadiness, they interpret it differently. They do not feel manipulated. They do not feel pressured. They feel invited into something meaningful. Your composure signals that the story is about principle, not performance. So personal story combined with strategic placement and emotional control builds trust. And trust is what we've been talking about. Trust is when resistance drops. Decisions, they feel natural. The goal is not to make people cry. The goal is to make people think differently. Emotion can support that process. Stability anchors it. That combination is powerful, man. And that is why emotional control is not optional when you are telling a story that carries weight. It's essential. I'll end with this. Deeply personal stories are powerful because they reveal what you believe at your core. They show what has shaped you into who you are. They show why you care. Power without discipline can damage your credibility, so be careful. When you share a story like I shared the one about my dad, you're inviting people into something sacred. That invitation must be handled carefully with responsibility. Remember the right details so the audience can follow the emotional progression with you. Practice the delivery so the message is structured and clear. Place the story where it aligns naturally with the objective. Deliver it with emotional control so the focus remains on the lesson rather than you. In the hospital, those machines were keeping my dad alive. In the boardroom, that story reinforced why the partnership mattered. It wasn't about closing a deal. It wasn't about a ballsy move. It was about communicating belief. And when your story reflects genuine conviction, people can feel it. Trust me. When it aligns with moment, it builds trust. And when trust is present, decisions feel natural rather than forced. We moving.